1 week before we were to obtain our marriage certificate, while I was at the wedding dress shop, I witnessed a live broadcast of my fiancé proposing to my stepsister. In the live broadcast, my stepsister giggled and threw herself into Andrew's arms, saying, "You and my sister are about to get your marriage certificate. If you marry me, aren't you afraid she'll get angry and run away?" Andrew playfully tapped her nose and said indulgently, "What can I do? After all, you're such a timid little thing who has nightmares. The doctor said you need to marry a man with strong young energy immediately, so I have to prioritize you. Besides, I've deliberately delayed your sister until she's almost 30. Do you think she can still find someone to marry if she leaves me?" Without crying or making a scene, I turned around and proposed to my childhood friend. I even set the wedding date on the same day as Andrew's wedding. After receiving an affirmative response from my childhood friend, I quickly took off the wedding dress and returned home. As soon as I opened the door, ambiguous sounds rushed into my ears. Joanna was sitting on Andrew's lap, her face flushed abnormally. Andrew had his eyes closed, leaning back with a look of utter satisfaction. Upon seeing me, Joanna deliberately shivered on Andrew's body, her eyes becoming misty. However, when she spoke, her voice carried a trace of desire. "Sister, don't misunderstand. I just had another nightmare, and brother-in-law was comforting me." I secretly applauded her superb acting. She had already accepted his proposal, yet still called him brother-in-law in front of me. However, I didn't expose her and merely gave a faint response before withdrawing my gaze to prepare to get my documents from the bedroom. Seeing that I ignored him, Andrew frowned slightly, stood up from the sofa, and grabbed me. "Joanna has been having nightmares at home lately, so I let her stay with us for a while. Don't misunderstand. If it were the old me, I would have definitely made a scene and questioned him. But now, I just felt disgusted. Because upon hearing Andrew's voice again, all I could think of was the live broadcast where he knelt on one knee to propose to Joanna. From that moment, my love for him completely vanished. "Rest assured, I definitely won't misunderstand," I said, then stepped over their intimate clothing scattered on the floor as I walked toward the bedroom. Just as I was about to lock the bedroom door, a sudden wave of heat came from behind me. Andrew followed me into the bedroom, pinning me against the wall. His breath enveloped me as a barrage of kisses landed on my neck. "Vivian, did you see any live broadcast today?" I calmly pushed him away and countered, "What live broadcast?" Before he could answer, his eyes suddenly flashed with panic. Following his gaze, I noticed the underwear scattered on the bed. At that moment, Joanna came running into the bedroom. Like a shy kitten, she grabbed the underwear in her hand and said with some embarrassment, "Oh, these are the dirty clothes I just changed out of. I forgot to take them away." As she spoke, she casually flashed the diamond ring on her hand at me. I ignored the provocation in her eyes, but then noticed an identical ring on Andrew's hand. My gaze settled on his ring finger, then glanced at the stains lingering on the underwear. I said nothing more. After all, they were the true engaged couple. What right did I have to question them? While I was packing my documents, my childhood friend Julian called. "Vivian, I still want to remind you that once you make this decision, there's no turning back. This time, I won't let you go." Hearing Julian's words, my hand paused. Julian had liked me since we were children, but I fell for Andrew at first sight in university. I even fell out with Julian over it and forced him to go abroad. Seeing my prolonged silence, Julian asked with concern over the phone, "What's wrong, Vivian? Has something happened? Should I return to the country tonight?" I glanced at the calendar on the wall, where a red circle stood out prominently. After a moment's hesitation, I finally said firmly, "Finish your work there first. Just make sure to appear at the wedding on time in a week." Just after hanging up, the sound of the door being pushed open came from the entrance. Andrew, who had finished washing Joanna's underwear, walked into the bedroom, frowning slightly and asking in confusion, "What wedding?" I stuffed the documents into my bag and casually brushed him off, "The wedding in a week." Andrew froze for a moment, a flash of panic crossing his face. Wedding? Oh right, Vivian, I haven't told you yet I have to go on a last-minute business trip in a week, so let's delay our marriage certificate for now. Was it really a business trip, or was he planning to marry Joanna? I stared at Andrew for a long time, and amid his growing panic, I joked, "Who said it was our wedding? I'm going to a friend's wedding." Hearing this, Andrew's tense expression finally relaxed. "You should go out more. Staying home all day makes you lifeless. Look at how vibrant your sister is." I pursed my lips and said nothing. After graduating from university, it was Andrew who begged me to quit my job to stay with him. Later, to accompany him at social events, I cut off nearly all my Facebook connections. Yet now, he complained that I lacked vitality. At that moment, Joanna shouted from outside the bedroom door, "Brother Andrew, my parents called and want us to go home for dinner. They said it's time for the weekly family dinner." Hearing this, my hanging fingertips trembled sharply. In my senior year, my father and stepmother teamed up to kick me out of the house. It was Andrew who used his 4 years of entrepreneurial savings to buy me a house. He said, "As long as I'm here, you'll always have a home." In the years that followed, I hardly ever returned to the Schur family home. All this time, I had truly believed in that promise. But suddenly, my supposed safe haven became a place where Joanna had taken over. The shift in attitude happened so quickly that I didn't even know when it began. It turned out Andrew had long been meeting with the Schur family behind my back. It turned out I was the only one treated as an outsider. Andrew's gaze toward me was evasive, and his tone sounded unnatural. Vivian, going home would probably just upset you, so don't go. I'll take Joanna back." "Sure," I replied with a smile, neither arguing nor making a fuss. Andrew looked at my faint smile but couldn't discern any emotion. Finally, he left without looking back. After he departed, I inexplicably glanced out the window. Joanna was nestled in his arms, talking about the evening's family dinner, both of their faces beaming with happiness. I gave a self-mocking smile, gathered all my past memories with Andrew, and set them ablaze. Andrew used to laugh at me for treasuring all of this. But he seemed to forget that the value of these memories was something I bestowed upon them. If I stopped caring, they became nothing. Although he said he was taking Joanna home, Andrew didn't return all night. Looking at the flight information Julian sent me, I decided to step out and unwind. I asked the taxi driver to take me somewhere random, and somehow ended up at the amusement park where Andrew and I had our first date. Well, now, let it be the place where it all ends. However, as soon as I stepped into the cafe outside the amusement park, a shrill voice rang out behind me. "I say, sister, how can you be as shameless as your dead mother?" I turned around and saw Joanna. "Your mom knew Dad didn't love her, yet she insisted on marrying him. And you? I know you saw the live broadcast that day, so even though you knew your fiancé proposed to me, you still chased us to our dating spot. Have you no shame?" Our dating spot? Andrew had even brought her here. I paused for a moment, then sneered, "Is being a mistress and stealing your sister's fiancé something worth bragging about?" "Humph, me, a mistress? I say, sister, Andrew and I are the ones getting married and legally recognized. The woman not acknowledged by law is the real mistress." I coldly stared at Joanna's smug face, gripping my coffee cup tightly. Suddenly, a glint of malice flashed in her eyes, and she grabbed my hand, splashing the entire cup of coffee onto herself. "Ah!" she screamed as the coffee stained her white dress with large patches. Before I could react, rapid footsteps approached from behind. "Joanna!" Andrew rushed over in a rage, shoving me aside. I stumbled back a few steps, my back hitting the cold wall. "Brother Andrew!" Joanna's eyes immediately reddened, her voice trembling. It hurts so much." Andrew held her tenderly, stunned for a moment upon seeing me, then barked, "Vivian? Why is it you? Are you stalking me?" "Stalking you? I didn't even." I opened my mouth, but he cut me off. "Enough." His eyes were full of disgust. "I know you're jealous of Joanna, And I always thought it was because you had no mother, so I didn't hold it against you. But I never imagined you'd do something this harmful." Hearing Andrew's words, I stood frozen. The person who once loved you knows best how to hurt you. Seeing my continued silence, Andrew picked up a steaming cup of coffee nearby and splashed it directly at me. "This is what I owe Joanna for all these years." My hand turned bright red from the burn, a searing pain penetrating from my skin to my core. At that moment, I finally realized the Andrew I once knew was long gone. A nearby employee was about to defend me when a sudden explosion rang out. The overhead light bulb began to sway, and it seemed like sparks were flying in the cafe. Within a second, screams erupted around me. Everyone panicked and rushed toward the exit. I instinctively reached for Andrew, but he had already grabbed Joanna and dashed out without hesitation, completely forgetting about me. I stood there dazed, watching Andrew and Joanna's figures disappear from my sight. In the end, it was a cafe employee who dragged me stumbling toward the exit. When I re-entered Andrew's field of vision, it was as if he suddenly remembered me. He frowned to mask his pain but still showed some regret. "Good thing you're okay. But if you hadn't bullied Joanna just now, how could I have forgotten you there?" I stared intently at his expression, his regret seeming genuine. But I still averted my gaze. "Andrew, I'm tired. I'm going home to rest." After that day, Andrew and I reached a tacit understanding. He didn't mention my burn, just as I didn't ask about our marriage certificate timeline. We both knew clearly that neither of us was the one the other would marry. It wasn't until the day before the wedding that Andrew tentatively told me, "Vivian, there's an urgent matter at the company. I have to go on a 2-day business trip to the neighboring city. As for the marriage certificate and wedding, let's wait for the next auspicious day." I was choosing earrings for the next day's wedding in front of the mirror when I saw the wedding ring on his ring finger, identical to my stepsister's. "I understand," I replied calmly. He let out a relieved breath and quickly walked to the door. The moment the door closed, my smile collapsed. My phone screen lit up with a message from Julian, "See you at the wedding tomorrow." The next day, I woke up early. Though I didn't know where Andrew was, I was certain he was trying on his groom's suit. Just like me at that moment, preparing for my own wedding. When Julian's convoy picked me up and brought me to the hotel, I had just stepped out of the car when someone called out. "Well, if it isn't my dear sister?" Joanna's irritating voice came from behind. "What? Dressed like this to steal Andrew away? Or to deliberately disgust him?" Several bridesmaids behind her eyed me with disdain. "You've misunderstood. I'm not here for Andrew. The one I'm marrying today isn't him." The crowd burst into laughter again. Another bridesmaid pointed at me scornfully, "Stop pretending, big sister. Who doesn't know you've been dreaming of marrying Andrew every day? Could it be that you've been too aloof all this time and, afraid you'd never marry, you've been clinging to our Joanna's fiancé?" Joanna mocked, "I say, if you're so desperate to marry, there are so many men on the street. Why not just pick one?" As she spoke, she casually pointed at a lame janitor behind her. "How about this one? Though he's lame in one leg, he's got everything a man should have. Guaranteed you won't lose out." The surrounding jeers and laughter were relentless. "My marriage is none of your concern," I said coldly. Joanna's smile froze on her face, and she suddenly raised her voice, "Everyone, look. This woman couldn't snag my husband, and now she's here in a wedding dress to ruin the wedding." The crowd began to gather, their pointing and whispering cutting like knives. Women these days are so shameless. I heard she's almost 30, no wonder she's so desperate to marry. Bursts of laughter erupted from the crowd, and even my father rushed over upon hearing the commotion. "Vivian, have you no shame? Dressed like this to disrupt your sister's wedding?" he shouted sternly. "Get out of here now." I bit my lower lip hard, letting the taste of blood spread. Her wedding? Her wedding is stealing my fiancé? My father froze for a moment but quickly regained his composure. "Stop talking nonsense. Get lost." "But Dad, why have you always been so biased since we were kids? I'm your daughter too. My father sneered, blame your damned mother. With that, he raised his hand and slapped me hard. With me here today, no one will ruin my daughter's wedding. I fell to the ground from the blow, Joanna's triumphant laughter ringing above me. What's going on? The next second, Andrew's voice sounded. I turned toward it and saw him standing not far away in a sharp suit, his face full of shock. His gaze darted between Joanna's wedding dress and mine, finally settling on my face. Vivian. His voice trembled as he helped me up. Why are you here? I shook off his hand. Shouldn't you first explain how your business trip turned into a wedding? I saw Andrew's Adam's apple bob, as if he wanted to say something but swallowed it back. Vivian, he finally spoke, his voice low, today is mine and Joanna's big day. Can we talk about anything else when I get back? I almost laughed out loud. Andrew, you think too highly of yourself. I told you, I'm here for my own wedding. He shook his head, a trace of pity in his eyes. Stop fooling around. Where's your groom? Everyone knows you've been with me for years. Who else would marry you besides me? Andrew, the wedding's about to start, his assistant rushed over to remind him. Andrew gave me one last look and instructed the bouncer at the door, keep an eye on her. Don't let her come in and cause trouble. Then he turned, arm around Joanna, and left without looking back. I looked at the bouncer glaring at me, then turned and stepped into my own wedding hotel. As the wedding march played, an inexplicable panic rose in Andrew's heart. From the audience, he called the bouncer, make sure to watch that woman. Don't let her in, no matter what. But the reply made him sway for a moment. Andrew, that woman really is a bride too. Her wedding is being held at the hotel across the street. Since the bride had no family, Julian and my wedding concluded more quickly. Though we'd seen each other's childhood embarrassments long ago, I was still quite nervous on our first night living together. I lay on the wedding bed, counting sheep up to the 100th. Soon, the bathroom door handle turned, and Julian walked out shirtless. Stunned by his physique, I forgot my nervousness. I began staring at him intently. Water droplets from Julian's hair slid down to his collarbone, his body enveloped in steam. As his sharply defined abs drew closer, I suddenly felt shy and hurriedly covered my eyes. The next second, a pair of warm hands removed mine from my eyes. You've seen me so many times as a kid, and you're still shy. Be good, I'll let you look, don't peek. My face flushed, and I rolled my eyes at him for catching me. Julian held me in his arms, his warm breath brushing my ear, causing a tingling itch. As our eyes met, his large hands roamed over my body, like countless ants crawling across me. I looked up, meeting Julian's lustful gaze. Vivian, he said in an especially gentle tone, his thin lips pressing against mine. I instinctively wrapped my arms around Julian's neck, hearing him call my name over and over. Vivian, is it okay? We're married now, what's okay or not? Of course it's okay. Seeing me nod, Julian placed me on the bed. After what felt like an eternity, my entire body was utterly limp. As Julian cleaned me up, I instinctively shut my eyes tightly. Though we had already consummated our marriage, I still felt a bit shy facing him. As he carried me out of the bathroom, his fingertips brushed across my forehead. The next second, I heard his confession once more, Vivian, this time I won't let go. While Julian and I were lost in affection, Andrew was losing it. Married? Vivian actually got married? Wasn't she supposed to wait for me? Who did she marry? Who? Andrew roared with bloodshot eyes, completely ignoring his new wife beside him. Joanna, in a soft voice, tentatively clung to his arm. Brother Andrew, tonight is our wedding night. Yet Andrew, who had always been enamored with her body, pushed her away with a cold face and snapped, "Get lost." His eyes red, he kept sending me messages and calling. But all he got in response was the cold, mechanical voice. Even his messages sank into oblivion without a trace. Andrew seemed unable to believe that I, who loved him so much, would suddenly marry someone else. Just as I, a week ago, couldn't believe that Andrew, who was supposed to get a marriage certificate with me, would suddenly marry another. The next morning, I was sleeping soundly in Julian's arms when I faintly heard someone shouting outside the villa. As my senses sharpened, the voice became clear. Vivian. Vivian, who allowed you to marry someone else? Vivian, come out right now. Hearing his voice, I felt utterly disgusted and annoyed. Eventually, Julian opened the door and let him in. Hiding in Julian's arms, I said coldly, I'm already married. Please don't come looking for me again. Andrew glared viciously at the hand around my waist and said, Vivian, stop messing around. I know you're joking with me. Are you mad because I married Joanna? I told you, I can explain. Why would you need to hire someone to trick me? But soon, Andrew couldn't continue. He noticed the mess in the bedroom. After all, we're all adults. The room scent was heavy. I'm sure he could tell how intense things must have been between Julian and me last night. Andrew trembled all over, his legs barely holding him up. Vivian, you really with him? I yawned, ignoring him. Julian's cold voice came from behind. Listen, buddy, this is my wife. Be polite to my wife. Andrew looked at me in shock. Vivian, this is fake, right? Say it. Say it's fake. His voice shook. Andrew, it's real. At that moment, Julian leisurely walked into the bedroom. When he returned, he held a red booklet. Andrew, is it? Open your eyes and look clearly. We don't have time to play along. The bright red marriage certificate was placed before him, bearing Julian's and my photo. I said, show some respect to my wife. Julian flipped through our marriage certificate. When he saw the date, he realized it was the same day he and Joanna got theirs, the same day Julian and I did. Andrew suddenly realized something and collapsed to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Vivian, how could you do this to me? How could you change your heart? I sneered, saying word by word, Andrew, the one who changed his heart first was you. The one eager to hold a wedding with someone else was also you. After hearing this, Andrew tried to grab me, but Julian held him firmly. In the end, Julian threw Andrew out directly. After Andrew left, Julian carried me to the bedroom and stayed with me all day. After that day, I thought my relationship with Andrew would be completely over. But I underestimated his shamelessness. He began appearing outside Julian's and my marital home every day, even along my daily routes. Vivian. Vivian, I have something to say. In just a week, he had lost a noticeable amount of weight, his suit hanging wrinkled on him, looking like a downtrodden tramp. Ignore him, Julian said, wrapping his arms around my waist, his chin resting on my shoulder. Security will be here soon. I nodded, looking down at the man who once captivated me, now reduced to a repulsive shell. Vivian. He suddenly looked up, his gaze locking precisely onto my position. Let's talk. Just 5 minutes. I yanked the curtains shut, my heartbeat racing uncontrollably. Julian noticed my unease, his warm palm covering my cold fingers. Should I go down and get rid of him? No need, I took a deep breath. Let him shout if he wants. He's the one embarrassing himself. The sky had started to rain, yet Andrew kept shouting below. Vivian. If you don't come out, I'll keep yelling until everyone hears. Soaked to the bone, he stood in the villa complex's center, his voice hoarse. I know I wronged you, but I have my reasons. As his voice grew louder, more onlookers curiously observed the spectacle. Enough. I stormed out of the villa and faced him. What exactly do you want? Andrew's eyes lit up, and he stumbled forward to grab my hand. You're finally willing to see me. I knew you couldn't let me go. Don't flatter yourself, I stepped back to avoid his touch. Say what you have to say. I married Joanna for a reason, he explained urgently, his words rapid like a recitation. She's had nightmares since she was a kid, and the doctor said she needed to marry a man with strong young energy. I sneered, so what? What does that have to do with me? Her nightmares are because. Andrew suddenly stammered, because you bullied her a lot when you were kids, and I was just trying to atone for you. We were together for 7 years, and you'd rather believe her lies than me? I heard my voice trembling. Fine, then go back to her now. Get back to your precious wife. No, Vivian. I love you. It's you I love. He pleaded. I thought you'd wait for me. But don't worry, I'll take her to file for divorce tomorrow. We'll get the papers soon. I looked at him coldly as he cried, moved by his own words, finding his claims utterly absurd. He loved me, so he didn't marry me all these years. He didn't love Joanna, yet he married her over a nightmare. But Andrew, what makes you think that as long as you turn back, I'll still be waiting for you? I asked coldly. Vivian, I was wrong before, but I regret it now. I know I messed up. He anxiously tried to reach for me, but I recoiled, stepping back. As I avoided his touch, a flash of hurt crossed his eyes, which instantly reddened. In an utterly posture, he continued begging, Vivian, I was wrong. Please don't do this to me. Go back. I'm married now, and don't bother me again, I said. Have you forgotten our past? Vivian, you said you'd marry no one but me in this lifetime. Vivian, I don't blame you for getting married. I don't blame you for marrying someone else. Divorce him, and we'll remarry. I'll definitely give you a grand wedding then. Whatever he can give you, I can too. Trust me one more time, okay? He reached to grab me, but Julian suddenly appeared and pushed him away. Mr. Andrew, please behave yourself, Julian said, shielding me, his voice icy. Vivian is my wife now. Andrew's eyes turned sinister in the rain. It's you took advantage of the situation. Enough. I interrupted. Andrew, don't make yourself sound so devoted. Do I need to remind you what you and Joanna did? His expression froze instantly. Get lost, I said, turning toward the villa. Don't disgust me. Behind me, Andrew's hysterical shouts echoed, Vivian. I'll make you come back to me. Julian put his arm around my shoulders and led me inside, gently wiping the rain from my face with a warm handkerchief. It wasn't until the door closed that I realized I was already in tears. It's all over, Julian said, kissing the tears from the corners of my eyes. From now on, I won't let anyone hurt you. I leaned into his embrace, listening to his steady heartbeat. Yes, it was all over. Outside the floor-to-ceiling window, Andrew's figure blurred in the rain, yet he stubbornly refused to leave. I thought Andrew's harassment was enough to drive me to collapse, until Joanna showed up. That day, as I walked into the underground parking garage, a screeching brake sounded behind me. Bitch! Joanna leapt out of a red sports car, her makeup flawless but unable to hide the madness in her eyes. Have you no shame? You're married and still chasing my husband? I instinctively stepped back. Joanna, what's wrong with you? What are you pretending to be innocent for? She shrieked, her voice echoing in the garage. Brother Andrew has been coming here every day for the past 2 weeks. Are you satisfied? Feeling proud? At that moment, I couldn't help but think this couple was a perfect match. Control your husband, I said coldly. He's the one clinging to me like a dog. You. Joanna raised her hand to slap me, but I grabbed her wrist. Our eyes locked, the hatred in hers nearly overflowing. Vivian, you've been stealing everything from me since we were kids, and now you won't even let go of my husband? Her words ignited my fury. Stealing from you? Who stole whose father? Who stole whose fiancé? Joanna, your mom was a mistress, and so are you. It's the filth etched into your genes. Slap. A loud smack landed on my face. I held my cheek and looked up to see my father. How dare you talk to your sister like that, he scolded harshly, his eyes filled with the familiar disgust. Joanna's right, you're still pestering Andrew. I sneered, tasting blood at the corner of my mouth. Dad, all these years, you're still so biased. You believe everything Joanna says, but me? I don't even get a chance to explain. Explain what? He sneered. Your mom's been dead for years, and you still haven't learned to behave? Must you keep stirring up trouble for the whole family? I should have beaten you to death on the wedding day. The whole family? I looked around. Where's this whole family? My mom's dead, you kicked me out, and now you're talking to me about family? My father's face turned ashen, raising his hand to strike me again. Unfilial daughter. Mr. Ben, Julian's voice suddenly cut in. He firmly grabbed my father's wrist. Before you touch my wife, you'd better consider the consequences. My father struggled but, unable to break free, his expression turned uncertain. You. Julian? Weren't you abroad? I'm back. Julian released his grip, shielding me. And I'm Vivian's husband. Joanna tugged at my father's sleeve unwillingly. Dad. Look at her. Shut up, he suddenly snapped at her, his eyes fixed on Julian. Julian, today was a misunderstanding. Julian ignored him, turning to gently touch my swollen cheek, his eyes full of concern. Does it hurt? I shook my head, but tears fell uncontrollably. It wasn't for the slap, but for the absurdity of it all. My own father had once again publicly struck me for his other daughter. Let's go home, Julian said, wrapping his arm around my shoulder. Before leaving, he threw a parting shot at my father. Mr. Ben, you'll pay for what you did today. Joanna screamed behind us, Vivian. Just you wait. I won't let you off. Julian's steps faltered for a moment, but I pulled him forward. Once in the car, I finally broke down sobbing. He held me tightly, whispering word by word in my ear, I swear, I won't let anyone who's hurt you get away with it. 3 days later, Andrew found me again. This time, he held a divorce agreement in his hand. I looked coldly at the divorce agreement in Andrew's hand, a mocking smirk curling my lips. Divorced so soon? Looks like Joanna's nightmares weren't that serious after all. Andrew's face was pale, his voice trembling. Vivian, I was wrong. I really know I was wrong. Can you give me another chance? No, I said, my gaze sharp as a blade. Andrew, I really don't understand why you're pretending to be affectionate now. Your betrayal was thorough. He stumbled back a step, his lips trembling but unable to speak. I stepped closer to him. When you and she were rolling around in our bed, did you think of me even for a second? Andrew's eyes grew unfocused, his whole body teetering. No. I suddenly raised my voice. You didn't. His pupils shrank abruptly, all color draining from his face. His Adam's apple bobbed a few times, but no complete sound came out. Looking at him like this, I suddenly found it laughable. What? Can't say it? Andrew's legs finally gave out, and he fell heavily to his knees. I'm sorry. Vivian. I'm sorry. He cried hysterically, like a child who'd done wrong. Back then, I was blinded. I looked down at this man I once loved, my heart now a cold void. It's too late, Andrew, I said, turning toward the door. From the moment you chose to betray me, we were already over. No. He lunged forward, clinging to my leg. Please give me one more chance. I swear I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. Andrew, don't make me hate you. As my words fell, he let go of me. I turned and left, ignoring Andrew's anguished cries behind me. After that day, my life suddenly became peaceful. Andrew and Joanna stopped appearing, and even my father didn't contact me again. But news about the Sure Group began popping up frequently, stock prices plummeting, partners withdrawing, banks demanding loan repayments. Did you do this? I put down the tablet, looking at Julian, who was peeling an orange for me. He paused, feeding me a segment. It's just the beginning. I took it, the sweet tart juice bursting in my mouth. Julian gazed at me, his eyes so tender they could drip water. I said they'd pay. My phone suddenly rang, the screen displaying the long unseen word Dad. I hesitated, then picked up. Vivian. The voice on the other end was aged and weary. Dad knows he was wrong. Please ask Julian to show mercy. I put it on speaker so Julian could hear. He sneered, pulling a document from his briefcase and handing it to me. Dad, I said, staring at the words paternity test on the file, my voice eerily calm, do you know why Joanna always has nightmares? What? Because she has a guilty conscience. I slowly read the results. Based on DNA comparison, Joanna has no biological father-daughter relationship with you. The sound of breaking glass came from the other end, followed by my father's hysterical roar, bitch. I'll kill you. Then came my stepmother's screams and sounds of a struggle. I hung up expressionlessly and looked at Julian. When did you do the test? That day in the parking garage, he replied, wiping away tears I hadn't noticed. The first time I saw Joanna, I knew something was off. She doesn't look like your father at all. I gave a bitter smile. A lie that a single paternity test could unravel, yet he believed it for 20 years. It turned out Joanna wasn't my father's daughter. My stepmother had only turned to him to take responsibility after learning she was pregnant. After that day, I heard my father broke my stepmother's leg in a fit of rage. He even forbade her from leaving the house anymore. A month later, I learned from the hospital that I was pregnant. But as I left, I saw Joanna die. Her twisted face was inches from mine. It's all your fault. My dad disowned me, my mom's hospitalized, brother Andrew wants to divorce me. It's all you. I instinctively stepped back, but as the dagger neared my chest, a figure shoved me aside. Vivian, be careful. It was Andrew's voice. The next second, blood gushed from his chest, instantly staining his white shirt red. Joanna stood frozen, the dagger falling to the ground. Brother Andrew? She stammered, trembling. I didn't mean to. Andrew collapsed amid the chaos, blood spilling from his mouth. His gaze was unfocused, yet he stubbornly looked at me. Vivian, I'm sorry, but rather than living with regret like your father, I'd rather end it all for you. By the time he was taken to the hospital, Andrew had stopped breathing. Joanna, beside him, laughed and cried, completely unhinged. I watched them coldly, feeling little emotion. The doctor had said I was pregnant and shouldn't waste my feelings on irrelevant people. Eventually, Joanna was sent to a mental hospital. On the day of Andrew's burial, I received news that he'd transferred all his shares to me. Looking at that vast sum, I touched my belly and signed the confirmation without hesitation. After all, Julian's and my baby still needed to be a rich second-generation heir.